Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. I'm your host, Catherine Llewellyn. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. My host today is Maria Kheyfets, also known as Monelise. That's her artistic name because she's a singer-songwriter whose work bridges music, myth, and spirituality. With millions of streams worldwide, Maria's cinematic art pop songs are described as portals, worlds of archetype, memory, and transformation. In 2024 to 25, she actually wrote 100 songs in a single year, transforming discipline into ritual and creativity into myth-making. Through her music and her forthcoming works, Monelise guides audiences to safeguard the soul of art in a noisy world. And you can, of course, find Maria on Spotify as Monelise, and also you can find her on her website, monelise.com, monelise.com. So, Maria, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. So, we're obviously going to come and talk about your work, but there was something really interesting that came up in the prequel, which you called grounded work ethic. Would you like to kick off by telling us what that means to you and give us some idea of the kind of backstory of how that became a real thing for you in your life?
Sure. Yes. Well, I would say consciously, it became a real thing during my songwriting challenge year when I really showed up for my creativity, every single day, no matter the circumstances, no matter the mood. And then I really realized that for that, kind of transcendent, ethereal creativity to flow, you kind of need to counterbalance it with a very grounded form of just showing up, even if you don't feel, quote unquote inspired. So that was when it kind of really solidified for me into a concrete form, like what grounded work ethic as a form of showing up for creativity can look like. But in general, I would say just organically, I've kind of been coming to appreciate what grounded work ethic is over the past few years, because my music can be called very ethereal. Perhaps the themes that I write about can even be called ethereal, and people also tell me I have quite an ethereal presence. But I think when you have all of that ethereality and then you also don't have something to ground it, then you just end up too much floating in the ether. And at the end of the day, we do live in a material grounded world, and I think the magic comes when you sort of synthesize those two things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I think I was saying to you that if somebody watched your videos and listened to your music, the words grounded work ethic are not the first things that will spring to mind for people. I think you were saying how people can have this sort of idea that you're one thing or the other.
Yes.
So what's your journey been like in terms of, have you always had this amazing work ethic? Or is it something that has only kind of really come into play in the recent years?
I think I've always had this kind of work ethic. It maybe started when, I was 10 years old and suddenly I was thrust because I'm from Russia originally. And then when I was 10, we moved to Europe and to Luxembourg specifically, and I was thrust into this English speaking school, and suddenly I just had to adapt. And I remember how in 6 months suddenly I just learned the language from scratch, and then I was like, oh, like this association just formed in my mind that I can work really hard for something that I want and I can make it happen. And from then on, I think, just as a child, I made this link, and it continued that if I want to make something happen or I want to get really good at something, I kind of just need to, in slow incremental steps, get there by showing up and working hard.
It sounds like it was really natural for you. How old were you when you left Russia?
10.
10. Okay, you did say
Yeah.
that. So
Yes.
So you'd obviously be kind of steeped in the Russian culture. Is that part of the Russian culture, this kind of work ethic with getting on with it and making it happen? Or was it then?
No, to be honest, now that you mention it, I maybe didn't even make that link myself, but now that I think about it, yeah, absolutely. Because I remember when I was living in the United States when I was a teenager, and our mom sent us to or me first to this Russian piano teacher that also lived in Houston. And I remember, going for like my little pre-interview with him, and he was like, "Are you ready to practice 4 hours a day?" Because anybody who studies with me practices 4 hours a day. And can you imagine like combining that with the full day of school plus all the clubs like other clubs I was doing, going to the gym. And then I was like, oh my God, how am I going to fit in 4 hours? But then yeah, when I started working with him, I was like, it's true. There really is no way to actually stay in these classes unless I am doing the 3, 4 hours a day. But yeah, it's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could do with a bit more grounded work ethic over here in the UK.
Okay.
Over here, we've got a bit of a, I'm owed a living.
Mm.
I'm owed, um, I'm owed this, that, or the other is a bit kind of steeped in our particular culture.
What is that exactly? This mode of living?
Well, it's the idea that um, if you've been born,
Mhm.
you are owed enough money to live on
Ah, I see.
without necessarily having to work for it.
Oh,
I think I can imagine all the British people watching and listening to this saying, "How dare you say that about us, Catherine?" Well, I am a British person, so I can
mm,
say it. So it's kind of a lot of us are brought up in that kind of atmosphere, but it
mhm.
sounds like your kind of background was very different to that. It sounds like you don't, when you speak about grounded work ethic, it doesn't sound like an effort for you. It sounds like a natural thing for you.
Yes,
Is that right?
indeed. Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Great. So how is this then? So when you arrived in the States and you have this obviously a different approach to things from other people, what was that
Yes.
like when you were mixing with people at school? And did you notice a difference between you and them in that regard?
Well, it's interesting, because I went to a lot of like schools abroad that were bubbles in their own sense, and I had something else in common with my fellow students, which is that we were all mostly third culture kids, like, students, because I was in a lot of international schools and those kinds of environments, although also not in international schools, so I experienced multiple kinds of environments, but for the majority of my years at school, I was amongst other third culture students. Of course, we all came from different backgrounds, but we had that thing in common of being third culture, and that's a very big unifying element in itself. So it was kind of like a mixture of difference and similarity at once in these environments.
Wow. I have no idea what that's like because of course I went to
Yeah.
school in the UK with British people.
Yes.
So what was that like?
Um, well, it's definitely like a bubble that you can end up being a little bit stuck in because once you've been in it and related to that kind of people, it's almost like then not so easy to relate to just, people going to school in their own country. So most of my friends ended up just being people that I went to school with. And, it's a fascinating experience, a very unique way of life and way of learning and making friendships. And I think it really shaped me, those schools. Like I would say that moment when I went to my first international school and I learned English in 6 months, like somehow that was just such a formative experience for me. And I could never look back anymore to my previous life of just, being a Russian girl going to a local Russian school. Suddenly, like everything just transformed in my world.
Yeah, you changed gear by the sounds of it
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
and never looked back. So that's great. Being able to change gear and sustain it is
Mhm.
quite something. I think some of us have experiences where we change gear and then can't sustain it. So
Mhm.
how did you manage to sustain that? I mean, where did you get your energy from? Where did you get your stamina from to support you with that?
Yeah, I mean, a very good question. I don't know. Somehow it was like a way of life or something. There were so many moves, so many adaptations that It's like at that age you don't, or at least I felt that I didn't have so much choice, but just to adapt. Like there were definitely some difficult moments where, I think like the difficulty of adapting and readapting came out in other ways. But most of the time I was very motivated to try all these new things and these new opportunities that were given to me by, yeah, new countries, new cities, new schools.
Yeah. Well, that's lucky, really, isn't it? Because otherwise it would have been very, very painful. So,
Yes.
how did you then transition into working with music and voice?
Mm. Yeah, it was like a very interesting and kind of non-linear path for me, I would say, because it's not that anybody in my family, I mean, like, my parents or even ancestrally that I know of was an artist or a musician. And it wasn't really something that would be talked about, in my home, like even as an option to become like an artist at that time. But I remember having, I mean, I always had an artistic inclination. So I went through many phases. First I wanted to paint and like artistic little talent that, was kind of noticed of me. So drawing and painting. Then I remember having my first piano lesson at 14, and then suddenly this new passion was kind of awakened. At first I thought that was what I wanted to do, classical piano. Um, and then something happened where I feel like, fate kind of interfered too. Because when it was time to pick a university, I was very determined, that it had to be Oxbridge. It had to be one of those. And I had to go and study something very academic. Because I used to be like very good at, just school things, like brain things. And I thought that that was what I had to do. And, everybody in my school was like cheering me on, and it really looked like it was going to happen. And I would be the first person from my school to go to Oxford. And then it didn't happen. And I was like, wow. And it was really difficult to kind of, I remember at the time, accept this, what felt like a defeat. But then, life rerouted me, and I ended up going to Edinburgh University. And I was studying English literature over there, but there were also so many opportunities in Edinburgh to do artistic things like acting, theater, musicals. I ended up doing, my first singing lesson over there. So I didn't start that early. I started like 18 or 19. And suddenly I was just aware of this whole new world. And I was like, wow, this is exactly the place that I'm meant to be, even though I didn't think so. And so it was through this rerouting that I ended up, eventually finding my way into singing and writing my own music.
Wow. Did you go to the Edinburgh Fringe?
Yes, I performed there many times. First as an actress in a few different original plays, and then in 2019, so right before everything shut down and we couldn't perform for a few years, I had the chance to take my original show Hauntology to the Fringe. So that was kind of like a theatrical staging of my first album, Hauntology.
What, say again what it's called?
Hauntology.
Hauntology. What does that mean?
Well, that's a whole separate topic in itself. So my album is called Hauntology, but there's actually a genre of music called hauntology, and even a sociocultural phenomenon called hauntology. But to kind of cut a long story short, hauntology is this idea of an erased future and a present where we mostly look to the past for inspiration. So I don't know if you noticed how, like, during the past several decades in music, there's a lot of sampling, there's a lot of leaning on the past, and it's almost like in the present, there's not so much inspiration. So the past um, becomes like a ghost that haunts, yeah, the present and the future.
Right.
Yes.
Fascinating. Wow,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. So you really got into it quite young, then. You were not yet 20 when you started getting into singing.
Yes, I thought of that as late actually, but yeah, it's nice that you call it young. Yeah, I was, I think, maybe 19 when I started really singing, because I used to not trust that I had a good voice. Like as a child, I was rejected so many times for choirs and musicals, and I just thought I didn't have like any kind of a voice, or that I couldn't sing. Like when somebody tells you that when you're a child or a teenager, it stays with you like it could stay with you for the rest of your life. So I had that, kind of like trauma around my voice, I guess. I just did not believe that I could do it. Um, So I was maybe like 21 or 22 when I wrote my first song, and now I've written what, like hundreds, 1,000 maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
So that's amazing, really, because you're quite right. It can stay with you for your whole life, and it can infect everything else that you try to do as well with that kind of rejection. Did
Mm.
you ever make sense of um, why people didn't want you in the choir? And did you ever get any insight into why it was? You know, because you do have a voice clearly now.
Yes.
What do you think was actually going on when they were rejecting you from things like choirs?
Good question. Well, I'm sure there were situations where I just wasn't singing well because my voice wasn't something that I was consciously connecting with or practicing, as a child. Like, so when I went to the choir, that was just me trying for the first time. It's not that I would hear much music in my home or, that anybody was singing with me. So it was just something I kind of like, threw a dart at the wall and tried. So, of course, I probably wasn't like good to begin with. But then on my first try, like I would get told, you're not good enough, like you don't belong in the choir. So it was like, yes, okay, maybe I wasn't good to, maybe I just had to practice a little bit. But that idea didn't come to me at first. I also have to say that my whole journey with my voice has been about connection to myself. And I think that one of my kind of like maybe suppressed struggles with all of the adaptations I had to do as a child was that I would kind of disconnect from myself at times just to kind of, manage all of this, which could be a lot as a kid, moving around so much. And I think that maybe flowed out into my voice in the beginning, where, I would start singing, but then not be connected to my voice. So, in some ways, my journey towards kind of owning my voice and becoming a singer songwriter has also been about learning to like stay connected through my whole body when I sing. And that way, I'm much more in control of what comes out. Does that make sense?
Totally,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, given that I was asking you before where you got the energy and the stamina from to keep going, you know, um, I'm not surprised to hear you say that perhaps you maybe disconnected from yourself a bit in order to allow yourself to keep going. But then you found this way to. So, what was that like then when you started reconnecting with yourself in that way through working with the voice? What was
Yes.
that like?
Um, Something very new. Yeah, I think it was the first time that I had a conscious experience of, now I'm gonna really connect and really feel what's happening. Because, it can bring up a lot of emotions too and suppressed emotions when you're singing, especially when you're really like rooted through the earth and you're also, kind of receiving through your crown chakra too, and everything is connected. It can be, it was like strange, to be honest. I wasn't used to being fully connected to myself. I think it was maybe the first time that I really connected. I'm still on a journey to, not float away from myself and to stay connected, to be honest. But yeah, now it's already like a journey of 10 to 12 years. But in the beginning, it was just kind of something very new for me.
Wow. And you just slipped in there that you're receiving stuff from the crown chakra. Um, could you just say some more about that? When did you notice that starting to happen? And because not every singer will mention something like that, I don't think.
Yes. I guess I think of that as sometimes when I'm being creative, like writing a song or performing on stage, there is a way through which you can simultaneously be in control but also surrender some control and kind of allow something to come through you and to become a channel for something. Like, I think many singer-songwriters write about this phenomenon that sometimes it feels like a song came not out of you but through you, and or a performance came not out of you but through you. And often listeners feel like particularly moved by that kind of creation. So that's what I mean about receiving and channeling.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, yeah, again, I'm not surprised to hear you say that, given the quality of your music, which does have that multiple tones to it in terms of the
Mm.
feeling of it, the energy of it, which is very
Mhm.
beautiful. But it's remarkable that you encountered that and didn't turn away from it. Or maybe you did turn away from it and back. Who knows? But that sounds like it could have been quite challenging. after a period of perhaps being disconnected from yourself, and then you're working with your voice. And in order to do that, you are reconnecting with yourself, and doing that is helping you reconnect with yourself, I would imagine.
Yes.
So that's interesting that you didn't turn away and think, oh, God, this is a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I'm not really the kind of person that turns away from something cathartic or difficult. There were so many times when I just faced the difficult and the unknown again and again. I mean, I could probably do with a bit more in my life of sometimes saying like, okay, this is too much, I'm not gonna do it. I probably go through with those things like even a little bit too much. Like I'm a little bit too used to, sometimes pushing through what might be too much. So I get what you're saying, but I'm almost coming at it from like the opposite end
Yes.
of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing about it, because it's
Mm.
it's a very particular relationship with something, which I think is really valuable for people to hear about. For some people will be really resonating and recognize this in themselves. And some people will be hearing this and feeling, I've never felt like that. That's interesting. Maybe I could do a little bit more of that in my life. And other people listening will be thinking, yeah, I need someone to drag me down off the ceiling every now and again. Tell me just to take it easy,
Yes.
watch a bit of rubbish TV,
Yes.
chill out. So,
Exactly.
so it sounds like you're on this incredible journey. You said you're still on this journey of bringing yourself back to connection.
Yes.
Um, so would you let us know a little bit more about that, please? And also what that's like in terms of working with the music. So how's that what's that like? You're working with this ethereal, beautiful music,
Mm.
and you're also on this ongoing practice of surrendering and being grounded at the same time.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
that like?
Well, it's very exciting, and there's always something new that comes through in my albums. So in April, May, I recorded my third album, which is set for release sometime next year. And right now I'm in Los Angeles again. So I came back and I'm creating some visuals for it. And it's just been so fascinating how, the visual story like complements the auditory journey. But I think on this third album, I've done the most sort of, biographical weaving in of things. I've done the most of like going back to the very first apartment, where I was born and where I grew up for the first few years, like the city, what the city of St. Petersburg was like in 1992, how I feel that, my ancestry and my roots have impacted me. So I feel that I've really, in that sense, went back to myself the most in the creation of this particular new album. So I'm just, so excited to be finishing it up right now.
That sounds beautiful. And also, interestingly, parallels along what we've been talking about today, doesn't it? That whole journey you've been on.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
one of the things I love in your videos, with your music, is these incredible outfits that you wear, and the incredible lighting and the makeup, and all of these visuals are just incredibly evocative, aren't they? Could you say a little bit about how that comes through, and
Yes.
how involved in that are you? And because it's very individual, and it's
Yes.
very powerful.
Yes. Well, I've had, a very rich experience of creating visuals, and I've done so many videos and so many photo shoots at this point, and worked with so many different people. Like there were times when something was created on zero budget, and like everything was sourced by me and the other creatives, and my makeup was done by me. And in some ways, I just love those kinds of productions because they really bring out just purely the talent of the people involved, because believe it or not, there is a way to create amazing art on zero budget. Like this has been proven to me time and again, and it's just something that completely just exposes the skills of the people involved, and I think it's amazing. And I also notice a trend in our culture right now of we're kind of, I think people have a longing to go back to like for example 35 millimeter film or Polaroids, or like low budget productions, or the pre AI world when things were created by humans. And I just love that. I really think we're heading back towards this kind of nostalgia for when things were just created in a slow way, founded upon, like slow, beautiful channeled creation and just very talented people involved in. I just love that. I would like to hope, perhaps optimistically, that we're headed towards that right now. Um, and I did actually film something on 35 millimeter here in LA as well. About I think a couple of weeks ago, and it was just an amazing experience creating on film because you only get one or two takes to get it right, and if there's some little mistake or some little flaw, it's going to be in the film, but there's like a beauty to that. So
Yes, authentic. It's real.
yes, yes, definitely. And then on the other hand, I've also worked on very grandiose productions with custom made outfits and makeup and a lot of character building. Not necessarily my favorite productions, to be honest, but still interesting to have that experience too.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. So, where do you see your work going in time to come?
Um, I think I see my third album coming out in a new sort of multi-dimensional way. So I've been working on like a mytho-poetic book as well that I want to be an accompaniment to this. And I envision this book being something that, is not necessarily instructional, but rather awakens the reader through storytelling through which they can hopefully see themselves mirrored too. So yes, I see my album being released along with this artifact that I'm working on, and I yeah, after that I want to go on tour again and perform.
And when you put your music out,
Mhm.
obviously you're expressing something and something's coming through.
Yes.
Do you have any kind of um, hope in regard to the impact this will have on people, or how this might affect people?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I certainly, when I'm creating them and putting them out, I want my songs to be like portals, like spells that, touch something very deep in somebody. And recently somebody left a comment I think on TikTok that I thought was really illustrative of this. So I think somebody commented that they heard my song for the first time and it was like an ancient knowing was awakened in their bones, and it was like, they had always known this song yet they'd never heard it. So that's the kind of impact, I want to almost awaken this kind of like primal connection to something bigger through my music. So
Beautiful. And does that relate back to, I mean, if we bring our perspective outwards, thinking about the collective, the world in general,
Mhm.
do you feel, do you have a connection to what your music is doing in that context?
What my music is doing in relation to the world in general.
Yes, and the
Mhm.
atmosphere and the human
Mm.
collective. I just wonder if that's something that you reflect on, or if that kind of comes into your creative urge, as it were.
Yes. I mean, certainly, what I started saying about how I feel that there's kind of like a collective longing right now, even if it's unnamed as of yet, about returning to a more kind of soulful place, I think, especially with it. Like, I'm speaking to so many people recently who are just freaked out by how big AI is getting and how it's starting to take over even creative jobs, which is the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing. So I want to, preserve the soul of things and take people back to the soul of things. Like, what is it that we as humans can uniquely do through art, through creativity? Because I think it's one of our, primary kind of urges and purposes is to create. It's like it's almost a divine kind of thing. And I want to preserve like the soul, this divinity of creation, and these kind of almost, you can't quite explain through words what music can do, but I don't think AI generated music can do those same things. So I want to go back to the soul of things.
Fantastic. Well, I cannot argue with that. I think that's a fantastic quality. And I've no doubt that that actually is one of the reasons why your music has this beautiful soulful quality, because you have that connection. When we listen to music or witness music, we don't always consider what's in the heart of the artist when they're creating that music.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Exactly.
and I suppose one marker of beautiful music is that we receive an effect without having to understand what's in the heart of the artist. In other words, the
Yeah.
artist is giving us something which we can receive, like a beautifully cooked meal or something. We don't have to know how it was prepared
Yes.
for us to receive it and be nourished and uplifted by it.
Exactly. Yes, that's so interesting because also nowadays, as opposed to maybe a few decades ago, there's much more emphasis on like the artist as a personality suddenly. It used to be a little bit different that we didn't have to know the artist personally and the enigma was kind of part of the appeal, but now it's very different. It's quite the opposite right now, so trend wise anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting as well. So do you also, as well as doing the music, do you also um, speak or write as you about your ideas or your philosophy or anything like that? Do you do that as well? Or are you channeling it all through the music?
Well, like the mythopoetic book is a new venture for me. It honestly, it's been strange to write in that way because I'm so used to kind of doing it through music. But I do want to experiment with this new format too, because I receive a lot of feedback that people enjoy listening to me speak, and but I'm still kind of like only coming to own this thing about myself. I think like performing also provides a certain veil and perhaps mask that you only communicate about yourself through this somewhat veiled, mysterious manner of art. But somehow I receive a lot of feedback that people get something very positive from just hearing me speak and almost be, Maria more than Monelise. So I want to give her some kind of space too, while still retaining that kind of evocative mystery of Monelise too. So I'm still searching for the right balance.
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because talking to you, you clearly have some really nuanced perspectives and nuanced connections with things, and that is valuable for people to hear. I'm your interviewer, as it were, at the moment, so I'm here doing this with you, and I'm noticing some of the things you're saying and the way you say them kind of resonate through me in a different way from my own thoughts. Which means it's adding something to me.
Yes.
And I can only imagine people listening and watching this are having the same thing happen. There's a quality here that's different, like a thread that's different, which.
Interesting.
And do you feel this period of time since you first started working with your voice and reconnecting more with yourself, have you noticed yourself evolving and changing as a person? And have you noticed your life being affected as a result of that particular practice that you've been following for all these years?
Definitely. I find it so interesting just as a phenomenon too, how, art, or at least in my case, just to speak for myself, art mirrors life and life mirrors art. And you can manifest things in your life through art and vice versa too. Because when I evolve as a person, my music changes, my voice changes, the depth of what I can bring changes, and also my songs change who I am. Sometimes my songs are pretty prophetic. Like I'll write something and then it only makes sense 3 or 4 years later. So yes, definitely. I think the two are influencing each other the whole time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, how beautiful. Well, I've so loved this conversation we've been having today, Maria.
Oh,
I do love your music. I recommend that people check you out on Spotify and also go to monelise.com. And you also very kindly sent me one of your tracks. So I'm going to be releasing that next week as a separate little mini episode.
great.
So people will be listening to the podcast and suddenly the next episode will come on and it'll be you singing.
Amazing. I
And
love that. Thank you so much.
well, your voice will be the first singing voice on my podcast ever.
Oh, great. Wow.
Maybe not the last, but that'll be a lovely quality coming in. So, like I said, we have talked about a lot. And some people will have been listening to this and kind of tuning into some of what we've been talking about. Is there something that you'd like to say to the listeners that is something they might experiment with to help them connect more with whether it's grounded work ethic or whether it's finding an extraordinary practice, which is about connection to the self and expression. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes. Well, we're coming up to December, which I think is a great time to suggest something like this because before I had my 100 song in a year challenge, I did like a mini challenge and I think it was in December. It was like 20 songs in December or something, around a song a day leading up to Christmas. And the gems kind of started emerging then. And, I would love to invite the listeners, if they resonate, to come up with their own maybe pre-Christmas ritual where every day they create something, even if it's 20 minutes a day, a little drawing, or 5 minutes a day, and to set some kind of intention. Like in my case, the intention was to show up for my practice. And then when good songs arrived, that was more like a reward on top of the main point of the exercise. But, maybe the intention is like, you're making a little intuitive drawing every day and you want to break past a block that you're facing around something, and maybe through the drawings eventually something will come through. You can get so creative with how you design your creative ritual, but I think, yeah, I would love to recommend this practice to the listeners.
What a fantastic suggestion. And I could just imagine if everybody listening did that in December, there'd be this sort of energetic lifting feeling
Exactly.
around the place, which is such a
Exactly.
beautiful idea. And a lot more interesting than scrabbling around trying to cope with all the logistics of Christmas.
Yes, absolutely. It does kind of take you, because sometimes it's so like, I love Christmas, but you also get so sucked into like the obligatory aspects of it, like, to prepare all the presents and to get presents for this and that. And sometimes you don't even really want to do it, but you do it because it's Christmas. And it's nice just to have something unusual happening, I think, around that time to kind of counter. It's like Christmas brings soulfulness, but it can also bring a little bit of soullessness too, or at least in my experience. So, yeah, I think this practice can be something very connective for the soul.
Beautiful. So, like I said, we have talked about an awful lot and it's been fascinating. Has there been a favorite part of our conversation today?
Oh my gosh, like, I loved everything about our conversation. It flew by. It feels like it's been 5 minutes, and you asked such good questions that, they both made me reflect, and also I didn't struggle to answer them. So, I said things that were perhaps discoveries for me, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I really need to like really think about this. So it's been just such a great flow. I think I liked the whole conversation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, I loved it as well. Thank you so much, Maria Kheyfets.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. It's been such a pleasure.
So thank you so much, everyone watching and listening. That's all for Truth and Transcendence today. Do go and check out Maria's music on Spotify. I will put the link in the show notes. I always really appreciate it if you give a review on Apple Podcasts and if you tell your friends. So I hope to see you next week, truthandtranscendence.com. And thanks again to Maria.
Thank you.